This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 181.
My worst day in the classroom could still be some of those kids' best day. Like the hour I hated the most today could have been the hour that kid still looked forward to. So that's crazy powerful, because some of the kids that I teach would give anything to have my worst day, because I still ate, and I still came home to a loving family, and I still came home to a dry, warm place.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action, because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Erman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I'm here with another fantastic conversation with another State Teacher of the Year. I'm so grateful and so fortunate to talk to every educator, every author and speaker and doctor that I've had on this show. But most of all, the teacher conversations are just my favorite. And I've had the unique honor of speaking to so many State Teacher of the Year winners. Tonight's conversation was with Bryan Kerns from Tennessee, and it was fantastic. It was so unique and so different, but at the same time, so similar in the sense of his passion and his joy for bettering the lives of the students that he works with. He has a unique experience, both in education and outside of education, and careers that he has pursued, and the experiences that he brings back to the classroom. But the course and the opportunities that he's created for his students are pretty amazing, and it's inspiring to listen to, and it gives you hope and inspiration for what you can do in your school community. And when you see a need for how you can change and better the lives of your students, Bryan gives you a path to follow and a really approach that has made a profound impact on the community that he's living in. So I don't really want to take anything else away from the conversation. I want to jump right into my conversation with Bryan Kerns. Hi, Bryan. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing tonight?
Terrific. Doing great.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me. So I'm really excited for this conversation. So to kick things off, just please officially introduce yourself to our audience. Let us know where you are coming from and give us a snapshot of your career in education.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Bryan Kerns. I live in Northeast Tennessee, in a town called Kingsport, Tennessee, up in the mountains. I'm looking at Virginia and North Carolina from my porch, and so we're kind of right up there in the corner. I'm the 2025 Tennessee Teacher of the Year, and I have a pretty unique story as a teacher. I started as a math teacher because that was the subject I was good at, and I didn't want to be an engineer anymore in college because it was just too serious. I co-opted, and it was adults, and it was just boring. So I said, well, I like helping young people, and I'm good at math, so that's what I'll do. So I majored in math education, secondary ed, came back home to the high school I graduated from, which is Dobbins Bennett High School in Kingsport. Started teaching math, and my wife and I threw a dart at the West, and it landed in Utah. And so we moved to Utah really randomly. And I'd always wanted to fight wildland fire. And now y'all are going, wait, Bryan, this is an education. So, but this is part of the story. So I always wanted to fight wildland fire. So I got a job with the U.S. Forest Service out there for a few years fighting wildland fire as a firefighter. Then we moved back home. I started teaching math again. And ever so often I would get off on a tangent about a fire story, and kids loved it. And so in 2018, I said, I'm just going to officially invite students to my classroom one Monday a month after school, and I'm going to tell fire stories and show cool fire videos and maybe get some kids interested in wildland fire as a career. And so I started what I call the Pulaski Club that year, and then that grew into a class the next year, a CTE class the next year. And then, long story short, or shorter, I now teach all fire science classes, no more math. So I transitioned from a math teacher to a fire science teacher just because it was something I was passionate about, and there was a need there, both in the industry and with kids. I mean, kids were excited about something real and something they could do the day after graduation. So yeah, that's me.
That's really cool. What would you say in your time in Utah, leaving education and working as a wildlife fireman? What did you learn in that time away from education that you feel, other than the fire stories and everything that transpired in your career in terms of leaning into that, but when you were still, for lack of a better term, just a math teacher when you came back to education, what do you think you learned from those experiences that impacted the way you facilitated learning in your classroom that you weren't doing previously when you were teaching math before, moving to Utah?
Honestly, I love that question because I have that question. I get so excited about teaching fire now, and kids are like, "Why are you teaching? Why aren't you fighting fire all the time?" So I still do fire on the side, but I learned a lot about myself because I was doing something I loved out in the woods with the woods on fire, and camaraderie with other friends in fire, getting to see the West, do all this exciting work. But I was missing that human element of, man, I love changing lives. I love helping kids figure out how to get out of this hopeless cycle they're in. And, working in fire, I loved it, but I was missing that piece. And so when I got back in the classroom, I brought that back with me. Like, sure, I'm teaching math again, but there's that classic quote of, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that kind of really got driven home to me. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go back in the classroom, not because I really like math, but because I really love kids, and I love trying to, like I said, trying to give kids down and outers, trying to give them some hope. And that's just, I would just be fighting fire now if I didn't have that part of me in there. And so, yeah, that's what my classroom is rooted in and based on. So even my years as especially my years as a math teacher, I was always known as kind of like, well, Kerns can figure it. He can teach them. This kid's, bombing and he's not doing well. He's got this going on at home. Put him in Kerns's class. Put him in Kerns's algebra class, which can make for a pretty tough day, but a pretty rewarding semester, or year. And so, yeah, I think that's a long answer, and you'll see me. You'll get to know me here over the next little bit. Like, man, he gives some long answers sometimes, but that's kind of it.
It's all good.
It's like, I think it's what I learned and brought back to my classroom was, there's more to life than just what I want to do and what I'm having fun doing. And then I thought, man, wonder if I could ever combine those two. Nah, that's crazy. That'll never happen, right? Like, I can never teach and change young people's lives and fight fire. Like, that'll never happen. But somehow it did.
So put them in Kerns' class. I can sympathize and relate to that. Obviously not because of the name. You mentioned about the relationship piece, and you came back to education because you care about students. And 181 episodes into this podcast, every educator we've had on, shares about that piece, and we can never dismiss how important it is to have those authentic relationships with students. But I would love to dig in a little bit more instructionally with the math, because struggling algebra students aren't going to turn around and succeed in your classroom just because they have a strong relationship with you. That strong relationship, I know, is the foundation for you to kind of open those doors up with the kids and to be able to help them find that success in math. But what do you feel you did in your classroom that maybe was a different approach for these students who, when you get to algebra, they were probably struggling in elementary school and middle school in math always, and they've reached this point. So what instructionally did you also do that you feel really helped turn a corner for these kids?
I think I tricked them. And so I say that kind of, to be funny, but also like it's true. Like I made them think they were good at math because that's what happened to me my sophomore year in high school. I took chemistry from a chemistry teacher, and he made me feel like I was really good at chemistry and the math that went along with it. And I think I was just normal, average. But then I took physics from that same guy the next year because, man, I'm pretty good at this stuff, right? And so I kind of self-fulfilled that prophecy that he said, hey, Kerns, and I was just a hard worker. I wasn't this brilliant math student. I was just a hard worker, and I'd grind it out. And so I kind of said, I think that guy, Mr. Butler, back in 1990, whatever, I think he tricked me. Like he made me believe that I was good at math. And guess what? I became good at math, not because of my intellect. It didn't change. Nothing changed, physiologically for me, but my confidence, I guess, if you want to call it that, changed. So I think that's what I do with those kids. And I hope none of them are listening because they'd be like, Kerns, you tell everybody they're good at math. No, but no, it's like, you're right, Ken. Like how many kids think they are bad at math starting in like the second grade because they had a teacher that said, well, I just can't believe it. Why can't you do this? Everybody else is doing okay with this. And they self-fulfill that. And then so they get to me as a freshman. So what I used to do is I would take every freshman who failed Algebra 1 in the fall, and I would start them over in the spring semester. So I had this class of failures in Algebra 1 that, spring semester. And they all do it. They came in there and they're like, we all failed. That's why we're in here with Kerns. And I would always say, well, actually, I kind of handpicked you guys for this class because I met with your teacher and we talked about you and your habits and your potential actually. And I handpicked you for this class because there's a lot of other things in your way besides you being bad. You're not bad at math. There's just a lot of other things that make you think that. And so I think, the relationship piece is huge. But then they got to trust that you're not just blowing smoke, right? But I really, truly believe that there are very few students out there that can't do it. Now, I've taught some of those that have a really, really rough time that, that they do need accommodations and extra help. But man, a lot of them, I just find that they just like you said, they self-fulfill the wrong prophecy. And so I try to change that prophecy. I say, listen, you just solved a one-step equation. Like you nailed it. And we're going, man, my kid solves a one-step equation in fifth grade. But I don't tell them that. I'm like, this is algebra and you just did it. Now let's keep going. And so I think there's that. Like, it's like, what do you expect from kids? And then you got to change what they expect from themselves. And you got to say, forget about how you felt or what people said from here back. But then even deeper than that, Ken, for me, the reason I am in education again is because there's so many more things that fit in that same statement in these kids' lives. Their homes are terrible, abuse, whatever you want to like. But so I not only say that about your math abilities, but like, hey man, forget about those things that happened to you with that abusive parent or with that whatever you fill in the blank. So man, I tried to make my classroom this fresh start in every corner of your life, and I make it sound like it's all like magical, but it's not. I mean, it's rough, and there's yelling and cussing and tears, but then there's also good tears when they walk across the stage at graduation. It's like, man, you were in a rough spot and you did it. And man, not only are you a good math student now, you're this happy and honorable adult walking across the stage, and you're going to be a good parent and a good spouse and a good neighbor. And I don't. That's just. I think we have to give them that prophecy and then help them self-fulfill that. Like, this is what you're going to be. This is what I see in you. You know.
Yeah, I love that. And I was good at math as a kid, and teaching math in fifth grade amongst the other subjects was always what I was most passionate about. And I remember early in my career, maybe even when I was in college, I read about math anxiety. And it was eye-opening for me because I never experienced it as a child, because math always came easy to me. But I started to be more and more aware of it, because you hear, and I love and respect elementary teachers to the ends of the earth, but I think it's more common for elementary teachers to have math anxiety because they're not necessarily strong at math. And so they have that kind of in the back of their psyche. A lot of parents may have that as well. And so at times I feel like it's easy for adults to say, well, I know math isn't your best subject, but you just have to do your best. And it kind of like starts to build that. And I saw it a lot as a fifth grade teacher. They go to middle school in sixth grade, and I really wanted to get every one of my students to be super confident in math and to be confident in their abilities to overcome and to, maybe work a little bit harder. You're going to have to put in more time. You're going to have to put in more effort than some of your peers, but you can do this. And I remember I had this one student my first year teaching. I knew she struggled with math. Her parents told me she struggled with math, and she worked so hard, and she wasn't always seeing the results of her hard work until her and I started to get to know each other a little bit more. I started to see how she learned and what kind of supports she needed, or manipulatives, or different things for the connections to be made. And there was a test that she got an A on, and I passed them all out. I didn't pass hers out. And I called her out into the hallway. I handed her her test. She looked at it, saw the A. I just put my hand up. She gave me a high five, and I walked in and didn't say a word.
Nice.
And I will never forget that. And I'm pretty confident that she didn't either. And it was like, we didn't have to say anything. It was just like, I told you could. I knew you could do this. And the other thing too, that I think is really helpful for teachers is the students, and my students and myself, I was never surprised by the scores on their tests, because I embedded formative assessment so much into the classroom for the students as well. Like, I wanted them to know that they were on track, or I wanted them to know that they were struggling with a particular skill that we were doing, so that the test doesn't become this crushing experience where they didn't realize they were struggling in the unit, and then they turn around and they get a D, a C, an F, and they have this now crushing experience with the exam. So I think it's important too to build in just little formative checks throughout the unit, so that the students and you are aware of where they're at. So when test time comes, like, they're confident, or they know they're not doing well and they need to do something about it.
Yeah, another thing, Ken, I'm that first story you told is awesome, because you didn't say, I can't believe you got an A, because then that just negates it all. Like saying,
exactly,
you can't get an A, but you did. That's crazy. No,
I was the running back that scored a 90-yard touchdown and walked off like nothing happened.
There you
right?
go.
I didn't celebrate or dance. Like, yep, that's normal.
Yeah. I mean, this is who you are. Let's go. But the other thing that's a little bit unconventional that I did a lot was for a while in that repeat class, I never even put a grade on the test. And I just said, here's something you need to fix. Here's something you need to fix. And now they would all say, well, what's my grade on this? And I just took months and months to say, who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't care what your grade is on this. I want you to fix solving a two-step equation. I want you to fix graphing a linear inequality. I don't care if you have an A, B, C, D, E, F, right? And I don't care if you get it in January or March. and I don't want to assign a grade to you in January, and then you get it in March, but I can't really go back and change that. So now that's a hard one because, in Power School or Aspen or whatever the grade book is, you got to update that weekly or monthly. So at some point I had to sit down with my principal and say, hey, my grade book's pretty empty, but I promise my kids are learning and we're doing. And I said, and I bet my kids could probably verbalize like how they're doing in my class more than most of their classes, because they say, "How you doing in history?" "Oh, I've got a B." "Well, what does that mean?" And I'm like, and so, but in my class at that point, I said, "How you doing in Kerns' class?" "Well, I really understand solving equations now. I'm struggling graphing those ones where you draw the line and you shade it though." Like, to me, that right there is understanding yourself as a learner, right? And regardless, I wish we could get rid of grades, man. I think grades are, again, one of those things that you kind of self fulfill, as opposed to, well, what do you know and don't know? Let's talk about it. Show me. But we got to have something to judge them by, I guess. We got to have a number or a letter, right?
Sometimes I feel like it's for parents more than kids.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And we've tried to get we tried to do the kind of standards based grading approach. I kind of did that unofficially for several years, with kind of what I explained there, more of conversational assessment and hey, I just circled these wrong. Well, can I calculate my average on this? No, don't worry about it. Fix these 3 problems and I guarantee you'll be fine. We'll call it a B. I don't know, who cares? And so again, that's really vague and hard to quantify, because then at the 9 weeks you need a progress report grade and all that mess. But you wish you could just say, all right, write down what you know and don't know, and we'll call that good. But,
yeah, unfortunately, the challenges are just the shackles that exist in education. It's not the challenges for you as the educator or for the students to know where they're at. Like you said, it's just those boxes we have to check and progress reports that we have to fill out. And like you said, updating Power School, it's like updating Power School hourly now, it feels like.
That's right. That's right.
So I definitely want to dig into your transition into the fire safety that you're teaching, but can you just tell us more about the community that you teach in? Because I feel like that is important to your story.
Yeah, so we're in Northeast Tennessee, the Appalachian Mountain Range. Like I grew up in the same town that I'm teaching in. My grandfather went to the 5th grade and then quit school, had to go to work on the farm in the mountains. My grandmother on my dad's side went to like the 6th grade, something right in there. My grandfather on my mom's side, he graduated high school, but went to the military and then came back home and worked. So, and that's kind of the story of a lot of folks in our region. And so my dad did go to college, so I wasn't a first generation college kid, but just some really cool poverty success stories, in generations in around here. But now we're kind of we have a strange, we're not an inner city school by any means. Kingsport's about 45,000 people. So we're not like an inner city school. We're still kind of an agricultural region, if you want to call it that. But we do have Eastman Chemical Company, so that provides a lot of AP, Ivy League type of kids at our school. So I'd say maybe 15 or 20% of our school is kind of in that. But then we're at like a 60% poverty rate. So if you think about that dichotomy right there, like we have a lot of kids in poverty, but then we have a pretty stellar crowd going to Ivy League and perfect score on the ACT. So yeah, it's and the kids in that 60% poverty rate, it's a unique poverty model, I guess, if you want to call it that. They kind of live in town. Most of them live with probably a grandparent. Parents are either part of the that pill epidemic or in jail or no longer around or transient or whatever. And so a lot of those kids are living with grandparents or aunts or uncles or whatever. And so, man, just fighting a lot of cyclical, I guess you'd call it poverty, but also just cyclical, like I'm living for today and I don't think any farther than that. Like I want to make sure I can get me a little Caesar's pizza tonight and I'm good for life. And so yeah, that's kind of the demographic we have right now, or at least the ones that I kind of am drawn to, as far as the down and outers. And the cool thing is, if you drive by our high school, if you drive by Dobbins Bennett High School, it looks like the richest school in America. Our community is unbelievably supportive, financially and resource wise. So we have this awesome high school and whole school system, high schools, middle schools, elementaries. And we're taking those 60% poverty kids and we are sending them to college and we're sending them to some of them to Ivy League. I mean, and so that's really, really cool that, okay, I am teaching this demographic, but I'm also surrounded by tons and tons of support to be able to give these kids hope and realizing that and seeing that. And, some of those kids stay in our community and it's like, man, you broke the cycle. You did it because now I see you with your kids at soccer practice and you're coaching soccer and you're happily married and you're raising your kids. And so that's kind of where we are right now. And we're doing a really good job of just trying to break that cycle for those kids. But it is, we got a lot of sad stories in our school. But we're trying to give them hope, and it's fun to do.
That's amazing. And I feel like that's where your course is born out of, because it sounded like it was one of your passions with firefighting, but I feel like you mentioned that you saw it as a need to serve the down and outers as you have described. So tell us more about let's just start here. How long does your class last? Or I feel like you guys might be blocked based on a couple things that you've mentioned, but just what does your class look like?
So, the state of Tennessee Department of Ed, they said, hey, we want to have a fire science curriculum in the CTE program of study. And so they talked to a structure fire department, I guess, somewhere, and said, hey, what would you want high schoolers to come out with? And so the structure fire department said, I don't know, take this 64-hour structure firefighter course and let's divide it into 4. And that'll be your 4 progressions of fire science courses for high schoolers in Tennessee. Check. And so when I got a hold of that curriculum, I was like, man, this is boring. And so I talked to the CT director, and he said, Bryan, there's just a couple of folks doing this in the whole state anyway. He said, take those standards and make it yours. And so I have my background's wildland, so forest fire, Smoky Bear stuff. And so, I took those standards and I said, there's jobs out there in forestry, natural resources. There's jobs out there in wildland fire. There's jobs out there with municipal structure fire departments. There's jobs out there as paramedics, EMTs. And so I just said, man, this is kind of an fire and emergency services program. And so what I did was I created the entry-level course. I call it Principles of Fire and EMS. And so it's a mile wide and an inch deep of incident command system is our first week. And then the next 6 weeks is wildland fire. And then the next 6 weeks is structure firefighting. And then we do EMS, emergency medical services. And then we do rescue and some cool stuff at the end. So it's kind of like, here's all the cool career pathways you could get into in fire or EMS. And by the way, most of these you can start Monday after you graduate high school. And so that's another cool thing is a lot of kids are ready to go to work. They get excited about this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you can go to work Monday after high school, or you can go to work Monday as a volunteer, like this Monday. And so that's happening too. And I'll tell you more about that later. But so, it's a block schedule. So I have them for about an hour and 20 minutes every day. and I have them for one semester. So my entry level class is one semester. And so we come in every day and I do a briefing, kind of like a fire department would do every morning. And I have 25 kids in every class. All my classes are maxed out. I had 401 kids sign up to take a fire class this year. And so, and our school's 2,400 kids. So a sixth of the school want to take a fire elective. It's pretty cool. And so, so we come in, we do a little briefing. I tell them about, all the incidents that are going on locally, and then in the state, and then in the U.S. and across the world. So the Palisades fire was a topic for the first couple of weeks this semester, every day. And then like we're in our wildland unit right now, and so we'll just like today we're talking about reading maps and topography and how topography affects fire behavior. And so we do a little bit of PowerPoint. 10 or 15 minutes of that, and then we get up and move. And so I tell them, hey, every day, whatever I teach you, we're going to do it. And so there's a lot of action in my class. And so you rarely sit there in your seat all day. And so it's funny. I tell my wife, I'm like, man, I got a bunch of squirrels in my class. It's like they're all just kind of fidgety and just ready to roll. And I'm like, guys, we got to at least sit here for like 12 minutes and just learn something. At least give me just a few. But they're always like, hey, what do we get to do today? And so, so then we'll get up and do. And so like today, we went out in the bay, and the bay is kind of my garage. And so I've got all my fire gear out there, and we kind of go out there and do the hands-on stuff. And, whatever we learned about on the PowerPoint today, or however we learned it, we go out and do it. And all the way down to burning stuff. And so I have an on-campus fire ecology research area. And so I took a hillside out at the track, and I told them to stop weed eating it. It's about a half an acre. And I divided it into 6 units. And so we go out there and burn those units. And so we're setting these wildland fire, prescribed fires, controlled burns. My students, the advanced students are the ones that light it and hold it and put it out. And I usually invite the biology classes out every time, and they get to experience that live fire event. And so it's all like we're doing. And and I tell them when we step into that bay area, that garage, like this is now a fire department. Like everything in here is not the school version. It's the real version. We have a Polaris Ranger with an 80-gallon tank on it. Like that's a real Polaris Ranger with real water that can put out real fire. And we have, about 30 sets of gear. That's real fire gear that can protect you from real fire. And so, again, it's very active, and kids love that, and then the coolest part is that the class is broken into squads, kind of like a fire department would be. And so at the end of the first week, I just go down the roster and I just say, all right, you first 5 are squad 1, you next 5 are squad 2, squad 3, and this will be your family for the rest of the semester. And so then every day, those squads have a job. And so there's 5 jobs within that classroom that day. So like today, squad 4 was in charge of cleaning the desks when the class is over. Squad 5 was in charge of sweeping the classroom. Squad 1 was in charge of radios and technology. Squad 2 was in charge of gear out in the bay. And then Squad 3 was in charge of sweeping the bay. And so every day those jobs rotate. And so again, that makes it real as well, because like you got to talk to your squad and say, hey, who's going to clean the desk today? Hey, I'll help you. If you'll spray, I'll wipe. Hey, who's going to sweep today? I swept last time. You can sweep this time. And so that's really fun. And then the coolest part, sorry, I keep talking, man. I just get excited.
Go for it.
The coolest part is once they've learned how to operate the radios and use radios correctly, operate the UTV and the pump, put PPE on in under 1 minute. So then the squad that's in charge of gear for that day actually goes on call. And so at some point during my class, well, that squad gets issued a radio for that class period by the squad that's in charge of radios. They issue them a radio. They go out and get their gear ready. They make sure the pump is ready, the UTV has water in it, all that good stuff. And then they call into service. And so once they call into service, from then on in that class, at some point while I'm teaching or while we're taking a break or while we're doing push-ups, they're going to get a fire call. And so I hit the fire button. They run out to the bay, get their gear on, raise the garage door, push the UTV out in the parking lot, and spray water on a cone. And that's the coolest thing. It is the coolest thing to watch because they think, I mean, you'd think there's a 10-story building on fire. Some of them are nervous. Some of them are scared. I saw one group praying one day out in the bay. I was like, hey, what are y'all doing? It's like, man, we're on call, Kerns. We're praying. And I was like, it's a cone. Like, it's just a cone. You just spray it out there in the parking lot. Yeah, but we thought, like a real fire engine crew would be, I mean, sure, they got to pray before they go on a call. Sure, y'all go for it, man, whatever. And so that's probably the most fun part of my class is you kind of feel like you're legit doing it. You're getting all the gear on, you're spraying water. We got lights on the UTV, it's cool. So that's a neat part. And then the other thing that's really unique is we have a prescribed burn team. And so I kind of take some juniors and seniors every year and I say, y'all are my go team. And so we have local landowners who call and say, hey, I need a 6-acre field burned off. Would y'all mind to burn that field off for me? And we'll go do it. So last year, me and students, we did 8 burns for 97 acres last year of controlled burns, which is, I mean, that's Looney Tunes. What am I thinking, right? That's crazy, but it changes kids' lives. So when they get out there, they're like, Kerns, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do with my life. And I've got several working in that industry. So that's a day or a year in the life of my fire class right there. So
that's amazing. And you're giving them hope. You're giving them opportunity in a community that needs it. It's something that obviously is local in the sense that it's a profession, like you said, that they could start Monday after graduation. They could start volunteering while they're there. And, and there's going to be many of them that pursue it as a career and many of them that don't, but it's, I'm drawing analogies to sports. Like I played sports in high school. I boxed in college. I never wanted to be a professional boxer. I knew that, but there's so much of who I am today that I learned in the practice room with my teammates and standing in a ring facing an opponent with no one else in there to support me. And, my work ethic, I know without a doubt was strengthened and enhanced in the boxing gym. And, because I always told myself, I might not be better than the opponent that's going to be standing on the other side, but I for damn sure will be in better shape than that person. And I will never be outworked by the person standing across from me. And that type of work ethic, changes who you are. And the confidence and the experience and the camaraderie that they're getting from your classroom, it doesn't matter if they pursue that career or not. That's going to have such a profound impact on them as young men and young women and whatever they pursue, both their career and their family. So it's amazing what you're doing with them and the opportunities. And I think one of the key aspects is what I keep hearing from you is how much onus and how much autonomy you're putting on them and allowing them to build their confidence and allowing them to be in charge and to take ownership. And I think that's so key in what you're doing.
Yeah. And again, it's that self-fulfill, hey, I need you to take this $2,000 radio, make sure it works and check it out to that person. And then I want you to make sure you get it back today. And I'm not even worried about it because I know you're going to do it. And this is a kid that maybe last year the teacher was like, I need that pencil back. Okay. Like this. I know how you are. But, yeah, it's fun to, and the other cool thing is like you mentioned, that camaraderie, that family feel. I mean, I've heard kids say, "You better come to school tomorrow because we're on call tomorrow." And these are kids, some of these kids terrible, attendance the prior semester, but they hear, "Oh shoot, I matter tomorrow. Like I better show up to fire class tomorrow because we're on call." And or whatever it's going to be. And so that's pretty neat to see kids' attendance go up for the whole day because I'm on call in Kerns' class tomorrow, so I better go, and my squad needs me. And for some of these kids, man, this is the first time they've been needed their whole life. Like no joke. There are kids in there that when they are on call and they are needed to, pull that hose off that UTV and spray that dinky cone out there. Like it's the first time they've ever hung their hat on anything. And it's the first time anybody's ever expected them to do something that mattered. And if they didn't, then all the rest of this is not going to work. And man, it's awesome because I think that's what, when you're not raised in a good home or heck, a home at all, really, your confidence in anything is shot. And to give them something, like I said, something to hang their hat on is awesome. And if they get their PPE drill in under a minute, then they earn a Dobbins Bennett fire shirt, a fire T-shirt. And man, that's awesome too, because now they do. I've got kids that wear that 2 or 3 times a week. They'll wear that shirt. Yeah, I'm DB Fire, man. And it's I don't know, it's life changing. And like you said, I mean, some of them I've got over 30 in the industry now from the past few years of teaching this. Some in wildland fire, some in structure fire, some as paramedics. Some go on to college to major in natural resources, forestry. But I've got hundreds now who, might have a little more confidence, might have a little more family feel, and know what a healthy family looks like just because they're squad. And they're aware of emergency services in our area too, which is kind of cool. So
yeah, that's really cool. So I want to play a little scenario out here with you. I have some bad news. One of your stellar star students who pursued this career after being in your class decided to get a education degree, and your school district has decided they're going to teach your class now, and you have to go back and teach math. So you go back and teach math.
Man, do you know?
Listen, it's just because
I write in.
It's just because you were so good that they have come back, and your protege is now replacing you. So you go back to teach math. How is your math class going to look different than the first time or the second time that you taught math after your experience now in teaching this course that you've had for the last few years?
Ken, I think it'll look a lot different because it'll be somebody else teaching it. I kicked and screamed for years to get out of math because I had a taste of fire. I had that one fire class. And I was like, I love this part of my day, and I just kept saying. They kept saying, when the numbers are there, Kerns, you could transition to CTE and be a fire teacher. And the numbers, kept growing. I would always check how many kids have signed up this year. I don't know. I think I was already kind of had that CTE student in my math classes anyway. Kind of that kid that was going to go to work right after graduation. And so that's kind of how my math class was kind of built. And not that I fudged the standards that were required, but at the same time, I did kind of say, I'm not going to have a kid beat his head against the wall trying to memorize Descartes' rule of signs in Algebra 2 if this kid's going to be a welder or a landscaper or a firefighter or whatever, or a teacher, right? And so I kind of had a better perspective on that than other math teachers, because math teachers, man, they love that stuff, and they're like, no, you got to know Descartes' rule of signs if you want to go to heaven, right? And so there's a lot of that. They love the subject, and so I think my perspective my classroom probably wouldn't change much coming back to math, other than maybe I'd be pretty sad, every day.
Other than you being depressed every day.
Yeah, it's like, hey guys, welcome to math.
No, but I appreciate you sharing that, because I find that I found that as an elementary teacher, where when I'm looking at the standards, one, that the state is expecting, two, it's on the test, which it is what it is, it's just a part of the job. But, I would look at the standards and say, like, okay, like this one's in here, but it's not that important. Or the standards is expecting them to apply the skill of multiplying multi-digit numbers or adding and subtracting fractions. It's not expecting them to do it on pencil and paper. It's expecting them to take a scenario and know which skill to apply to solve the scenario. So calculators were in my students' hands very early on and very often. And it's not that I bypassed how to solve it without calculators, but I would use the calculator as a tool to help them understand, this is why you have to have common denominators when you add. Let's use a calculator to test out this rule. And so they still had a good foundation in the understanding of the skills, but I was getting to that application phase much faster. And I find that with secondary math and a lot of different subjects, there's that passion of the subject, like you said, where they think it's so important, when it's like, well, it's really not in the grand scheme of things. Like, we want them spending more time on these problem solving aspects or these application aspects, because one, that's going to help them perform better in the subject, but two, it's going to help them just, applying this math to the real world. So, I do really appreciate that answer, because I think it's so important.
Yeah. And I was like year 2 as an Algebra 2 geometry teacher. And I was always the classic question, when are we ever going to use this? And so I would always like, well, when you find the trajectory of a ball bouncing over this, then you're going to need to find, and then finally I was like, man, I don't know. Like, the state said I got to teach this stuff to y'all, so I don't know. And then I thought, well, shoot, I went to school here, at that point, 8 years ago. And I took 20 whatever credits in high school. And man, I wonder how much of those things I remember. Like, I don't remember many of the dates from my history class. I don't remember any of the names from the stories I read in my English class. I don't remember the Andrea or whatever things from biology, but I got A's in all those in high school. And so what I kind of came to, and this is, I think, I don't know, I hope all the educators have this figured out, but I think they do. So this might not be real earth shattering. But I started telling kids, like, I'm just trying to make you tougher. And math's a really good way to build grit in your brain. And I said, to be honest with you, the same skill that kept me on that fire line in hour 27 with no sleep and, 50-foot flames running at me and hiking back down the mountain and back up, the same skill, believe it or not, is what allowed me to solve that really big Algebra 2 problem when I was a junior in high school. Like, it's the same grit. And so I would tell kids that, like, you're never going to use this stuff, but you're going to use your brain. You're going to use your grit in anything and everything you do. And believe me, if I use the skill I learned in Algebra 2 here at Dobbins Bennett as a junior or a sophomore in high school, if I use that skill on a mountainside in the middle of nowhere in Utah and it's on fire 15 years later, then I guarantee you're going to use this skill somewhere in your life. Not in the Descartes rule of signs, but the grit to go, yeah, I need, now tell me again how to do Descartes rule of signs. I really want to learn that and get it right, So that was kind of my new answer was, you're never going to use it. What? And then that opened the door to say, but you are going to use your brain, I hope. And you are going to use your toughness, I hope. And said, you got to be tough. Even this grit you're learning, you're going to need it as a parent and as a spouse and as an employee and a neighbor and a fill in the blank. And so that's kind of cool as a teacher, you got to answer that question for yourself big time, because you can only BS it for so long, right? You can only say, oh, you're going to use it on the test. Well, that's real life, right? The test is real life. Yeah, it's real life. But give me something 10 years from now that's going to matter.
I love the way you put that, and it's so true. And I do think it's earth shattering in the sense that I don't think many educators, I don't know if they share that or not, or they have that perspective, but it is that purpose, and math specifically, I think is such a great place for you to develop that grit and that problem, the confidence to solve problems, right? That you don't know the path or the solution. And I find myself even now as an instructional coach constantly being asked, hey, is there a way to do this? Like, I'm kind of tech savvy, self-taught tech savvy, but always like, hey, is there a way that we can do this with this program? Or they'll come to me like, can you make this work in Excel? And I've never taken an Excel course other than watching on YouTube, but I see it as a puzzle, and I want to see if there's a way to solve that puzzle. Mm-hmm. And I think that comes from that, like you said, that grit piece that you develop so much. So I think that's such an interesting way to put that. So I want to be cognizant of our time, and I want to jump into the exit ticket, which is the same 4 questions I ask every guest every week to wrap up our conversation here. So question number 1, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
I think you can teach kids, we need to teach kids really, really powerful thing is to teach kids how to forgive and how to be forgiven. And so I will apologize to students just whenever I feel like I need to. I have zero pride when it comes to like, oh, I'm the teacher. I can't admit I was wrong or admit I was whatever. So I really believe that kids need to see an adult asking for forgiveness and say, hey, I'm sorry about that. That was my bad. And then I think kids need to learn to accept forgiveness for whatever they might have messed up on.
I love that. I've never had that answer, and that's such a powerful thing to share with students. What is the best advice you've ever received, whether it be from a colleague, a supervisor, or even a student?
I mean, this is a weird one, but some of the best advice I ever got was don't take anybody's advice. Because, and it was actually about my marriage. Before I got married, he said, hey, Bryan, the best marital advice I ever got was don't take anybody else's advice, because this is your marriage and this is your deal. And so, you do cloud your judgment when you get everybody's opinion on something. And so I think, if you kind of root yourself in something deeper and try to rely on that, that other people's advice you can listen to it and even, you might even head down that road of what somebody told you to do. But in the end, I think we all need to really strive to be really deeply rooted in something bigger than ourselves and really rely on that to help guide us. And then, our advice is coming from like true, a deeper way of living, if that makes sense. Instead of, I think I'll Google this. Or, well, my buddy 3 years ago, I remember he was teaching this, and, and some of those may be good. But in the end, you're writing your own story every day, and every kid in there is writing their own new story. So I think it's fun to be open to maybe a new fix for them, or a new pathway for them, or a new advice for them. So I guess don't take anybody's advice.
I love that. The school year goes in waves. There are those days or weeks that we struggle to survive. What is something that every educator needs to hear to power up in that moment of struggle?
So, yeah, this is crazy to think about. Like, my worst day in the classroom could still be some of those kids' best day. Like, the hour I hated the most today could have been the hour that kid still looked forward to. So that's crazy powerful, because some of the kids that I teach would give anything to have my worst day, because I still ate, and I still came home to a loving family, and I still came home to a dry, warm place. And so that's a crazy perspective if you think about it. And I'll say it again. My worst day is still some of those kids' best day.
I love that. Absolutely love that. It's easy to fall into facilitating a repetitive classroom. What do you think separates the teachers who are the ones constantly seeking to change, innovate, and adopt new teaching strategies?
Shoot, I think they're just excited and bold, right? They're doing something they are convinced matters, and it's fun for them too. You can only last so long as a selfless, martyr in the classroom. I think you got to do something that you're excited about too, and I'm proof of that. Like, to be honest with you, Ken, like 8 years ago, I was kind of burning out in math, and I was like, hey, what else could I do here in the school district? Could I do like a homeless coordinator? Could I do whatever? And then I started my little fire club, and then that grew into. And so now I really urge my administrators to be really open and have an open ear and open mind. If you have a teacher that comes to you and says, hey, could I teach a theater class? Or you have an English teacher come and say, hey, could I teach a hospitality class? Heck yeah, make that happen, because I think when teachers get to do something they enjoy, everybody wins, and they stay in the game a lot longer.
That's awesome. So I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Bryan. How can our audience connect with you, follow along with you, or reach out to you in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you guys have notes from this or whatever, but feel free to put my email in there and my contact info, because especially folks who are interested in the fire science programs and trying to get that up and running in their district. I love talking about that. I love helping folks do that. I helped some folks in Oregon a couple of years ago try to get something and talk through something and get it rolling, helping some local programs. So yeah, I'm always glad to talk. And obviously, I talk a little too much sometimes, so they can always say, pump the brakes, Kerns, pump the brakes. So, and we have a website, my Pulaski Club. We do have a website, which is pretty cool. If you just Google DBHS Pulaski Club, so that's you can see some of my students in action out with flames around them and soot on their face. It's pretty cool.
Awesome. Yeah, we will link up to both of those in the show notes, which they can see wherever they're watching or listening. Just scroll down and you'll find that contact information. So I greatly appreciate it, Bryan. This has been such a fun conversation. It's very clear why you're the state teacher of the year, and what you're doing in your schools is really special. Not only as a math teacher, the relationships that you were forming with the kids and helping them feel like they could grow into something, but now the program you've created that's giving them tools and strategies and skills that they truly can, change that cycle like you described in your community. So your students and your community are very, very fortunate to have you. So thank you for everything that you do. Thank you for this time. And to our listeners, thank you as always for joining us and following the conversation. Bryan, you absolutely left us feeling powered up from this conversation.
Good deal. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week, we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.